And so, with that being said, let's take a look at some examples of body horror that, period. Let's take a look at some examples of body horror. I have a few that come to mind. I actually mentioned a few on my first stream, my writing stream 2 weeks ago. And we'll start with those, because those are what are inspiring me now, and I need to find more inspiration and maybe look at, the recommendations to see where that takes us. So, face. So, this is a clip from Gravity Falls, which, may I remind you, is a children's cartoon. I actually really like this show. About halfway through season 2. It's been a while since I watched it. I need to get back to it. And I knew it was good, and I knew I love Steven Universe, so I knew that the creator of this show and the creator of Steven Universe are good friends. Rebecca Sugar and I don't remember his name, are really good friends. And so I was like, oh, I'll watch this eventually. But then this scene showed up on a Watch Mojo video about, like, disturbing scenes in children's cartoons. And, like, that's all you gotta say to me. Like, just top 10 disturbing whatever, top 10 scariest whatever, top 10, like, anything, any top 10 lists that have to do with horror, I am watching. Alex Hirsch, thank you. And this clip was, I think, number 1 on the list. And faces, anything to do with the face, anything that's on the face, anything that should be on the face but is elsewhere, or anything that's on the face but is not there, is probably my weakness, my biggest I remember I saw a clip from, and we can load that pen, we can go to that one next. I'm gonna have fucking nightmares so I think about it if we're gonna keep doing this. I'm actually tearing up at the thought of watching some of these clips that I'm thinking of. So we're not gonna spend too much time on face, I don't think. But maybe we should. I can deal with body horror when it's other parts of the body. Like the twins from Dead by Daylight, they're kind of they're not pretty to look at, but they're tolerable. What we're about to alright, I'm just gonna shut up and I'm just gonna play the clip. I was totally putting off watching this. And what's worse is the noise. That's the worst part.
I would just like to say that as a rich capitalist, I welcome your tyrannical rule. Perhaps I can be one of your, horsemen of the apocalypse?
Dad?
Not now, sweetie. The grown-ups are talking.
Oh, wow, that's a great offer. How about instead I shuffle the functions of every hole in your face?
Oh, the scream. The scream. But let's rub it in. Let's take that frame by frame, and because I am no, go back. Stop. I hate the mini player. I hate it. I don't want it. What? No. What is happening? That's not what that's not the video I was watching. Okay. That noise that he makes is what makes it so... It's so good. It's so good. It's so... And I'm sorry, Ash, this is literally the final... This is from the finale. But, there's no context. Oh yes, for sure. Thumbnail for this vid. So as we can see, let's just take this in. His ears are his eyes. His mouth is now an eyeball. Oh yeah. His nose is on his ear, and we don't know what's on the left side. I imagine that's a mouth. Or he doesn't have a mouth because he's adds the idea of trying to make noise when you don't. Oh, hello. AKA one of my favorite short stories of all time, and it's actually not as bad when you have to read it, but still pretty bad. I have no mouth and I must scream. That's body horror. That's a different kind of body horror because it is. The distortions are not something you immediately identify as. I mean, of course, the final one, that inspired the title. But the distortions in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream are not immediately identifiable as a disability equivalent. Fuck it. Let's read I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream on stream. That's what we're doing. We're doing it live. We also have the game. We can play it on the Steam. Here we go. We're doing it. Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is, Ash. Is like he has the things, but there's the eye. The noise is what fucks with me. He has no mouth and he must scream, and he's trying to, and there's still there's still things to make noise, but and like distorted reality, like anything that distorts reality, which is what Bill Cipher does, and that's why Bill Cipher is an excellent villain. All right, we're reading it. We're doing it live. We're gonna read Harlan Ellison's "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream." He's dead, so he can't sue me. All right, time to pour. We need more coffee for this. I can't believe I'm doing this, but fuck it. This is my favorite short story, and I'm surprised I haven't gone back to read this, considering what it is I'm writing. Here we go. Limp, the body of Gorrister hung from the pink pallet, unsupported, hanging high above us in the computer chamber, and it did not shiver in the cold, oily breeze that blew eternally through the main cavern. The body hung, head down, attached to the underside of the pallet by the sole of its right foot. It had been drained of blood through a precise incision made from ear to ear under the lantern jaw. There was no blood on the reflective surface of the metal floor. When Gorrister joined our group and looked up at himself, it was already too late for us to realize that once again AM had duped us, had had its fun. It had been a diversion on the part of the machine. 3 of us had vomited, turning away from one another in a reflex as ancient as the nausea that had produced it. So, pause. One of the characters has been killed and is brought back to life. I'm not sure if it's been brought back to life or if it's a clone, like it's a trickery, if it's just a prank bra. But here they are reacting in a way of reacting in revulsion. The characters are revolted, so therefore we are revolted. All right, no more interrupting. Read it, Eddie. Stay focused. Gorrister went white. It was almost as though he had seen a voodoo icon and was afraid of the future. "Oh God," he mumbled, and he walked away. The 3 of us followed him after a time and found him sitting with his back to one of the smaller chittering banks, his head in his hands. Ellen knelt down beside him and stroked his hair. He didn't move, but his voice came out covered. He didn't move, but his face came out of his covered face quite clearly. "Why doesn't it just do us in and get it over with? Christ, I don't know how much longer I can go on like this." It was our 109th year in the computer. He was speaking for all of us. Nimdoc, which was the name of the machine had forced him to use because Am amused itself with strange sounds, was hallucinating that there were canned goods in the ice caverns. Gorrister and I were dubious. It's another shuck, I told him, like the goddamn frozen elephant Anne sold us. Benny almost went out of his mind over that one. We'll hike all that way and it'll be putrefied or some damn thing, and I say forget it. Stay here, it'll have to come up with something pretty soon or we'll die. Benny shrugged. 3 days it had been since we'd last eaten. Worms, thick, ropey. Nimdoc. I gotta wash my glasses because I'm a little fuzzy. Nimdoc was no more certain. He knew there was the chance but he was getting thin. He couldn't be any worse there than here. It couldn't be any worse there than here. Colder, but that didn't matter much. Hot, cold, hail, lava, boils, or locusts, it never mattered. The machine masturbated, and we had to take it or die. Ellen decided us. I've got to have something, Ted. Maybe there'll be Bartlett's pears or peaches. Please, Ted, let's try it. I gave in easily. What the hell? Mattered not at all. Ellen was grateful, though. She took me twice out of turn. Even that had ceased to matter. She never came, so why bothered? But the machine giggled every time we did it. Loud, up there, back there, all around us, he snickered. It snickered. Most of the time, I thought of Am as it, without a soul, but the rest of the time I thought of it as him, in the masculine, paternal, patriarchal, for he as a jealous people, him, it, God as the daddy, the deranged. We left on a Thursday. The machine always kept us up to date on the date. The passage of time was important, not to us, sure as hell, but to him, it, Am, Thursday, thanks. Nimdoc and Gorrister carried Ellen for a while, their hands locked to their own in each other's wrists, a seat. Benny and I walked out before and after just to make sure that if anything happened, it would catch one of us. And at least Ellen would be safe. Fat chance. Safe. Didn't matter. It was only 100 miles or so to the ice caverns, and the second day when we were lying out in the blistering sun thing he had materialized, he sent down some manna. Tasted like boiled boar urine. We ate it. On the third day we passed through a valley of obsolescence filled with rusting carcasses of ancient computer banks. Am had been ruthless with its own life as with ours. It was a mark of his personality. It strove for perfection, whether it was a matter of killing off unproductive elements in its own world-filling bulk, or perfecting methods of torturing us. Am was as thorough as those who had invented him, now long since gone to dust, could have ever hoped. There was a light filtering down from above, and we realized we must be very near the surface. We didn't try to crawl up to see. There was virtually nothing out there. It had been nothing that could be considered anything for over 100 years. Only the blasted skin of what had once been the home of billions. Now there were only 5 of us, down here inside, alone with Am. I heard Ellen saying frantically, "No, Benny, don't come on. Don't. Come on, Benny. Don't, please." Then I realized I had been hearing Benny murmuring under his breath for several minutes. He was saying, I'm gonna get out, over and over again. His monkey-like face was crumpled in an expression of beatific delight and sadness all at the same time. The radiation scars Am had given him during the festival were drawn down into a massive pink-white puckerings, and his features seemed to work independently of one another. Perhaps Benny was the luckiest of the 5 of us. He had gone stark raving mad many years before. Stark staring mad many years before. But even though we could call Am any damn thing we liked, could think the foulest thoughts of the fused memory banks and corroded base plates, of burnt-out circuits and shattered control bubbles, the machine would not tolerate our trying to escape. Benny leaped away from me as I made a grab for him. He scrambled up the face of a smaller memory cube, tilted on its side and filled with rotted components. He squatted there for a moment, looking like the chimpanzee Am had intended him to resemble. Then he leapt high, caught a trailing beam of pitted, corroded metal, went up, and hand over hand like an animal, until he was on a girded ledge 20 feet above us. "Oh, Ted, Nimdoc, help him, get him down before—" She cut off. Tears began to stand in her eyes. She moved her hands aimlessly. It was too late. None of us wanted to be near him when whatever was going to happen happened. And besides, we all saw through her concern. When Am had altered Benny during the machine's utterly irrational historical phase, it was not merely Benny's face that the computer had made like a giant's ape. He was big in the privates. She loved that. She serviced us as a matter of course. She loved it from him. Oh, Ellen, pedestal Ellen, pristine, pure Ellen, Ellen the clean. Scum. Filth. Gorster slapped her. She slumped down, staring up at the poor loony Benny, and she cried. It was her big defense, crying. We had gotten used to it 75 years earlier. Gorster kicked her in the side. Then the sound began. It was light, then that sound, half light and half sound and half light. Something that began to glow from Benny's eyes and pulsing with growing loudness. Dim sonorities that grew more gigantic and brighter as the light sound increased in tempo. It must have been painful, and the pain must have been increased with the boldness of the light, the rising volume of the sound, for Benny began to mewl like a wounded animal. At first softly when the light was dim and the sound was muted, then louder as his shoulders hunched together, his back humped, and as though he was trying to get away from it. His hands folded across his chest like a chipmunk's. His head tilted to the side, the sad little monkey face pinched in anguish. Then he began to howl as the sound coming from his eyes grew louder and louder and louder. I slapped the sides of my head with my hands. I couldn't shut it out. It cut through easily. The pain shivered through my flesh like tinfoil on a tooth. And Benny was suddenly pulled erect. On the girder he stood up, jerked up to his feet like a puppet, light now pulsating out of his eyes in two great round beams. The sound crawled up some incomprehensible scale. Then he fell straight forward, hit the plate steel floor with a crash. He lay there, jerking spastically as the light flowed around and around him, and the sound spiraled out of normal range. The light beat its way back inside his head. The sound spiraled down. He was left lying there, crying piteously. His eyes were two soft, moist pools of pus-like jelly. Am had blinded him. Gorster and Nimdoc and myself, we turned away. But not before we caught the relief on Ellen's warm, concerned face. Sea green light suffused the cavern where we made camp. Am provided punk, and we burned it, sitting huddled around the wan and pathetic fire, telling stories to keep Benny from crying in his permanent night. What does Am mean? Gorster answered him. We had done this sequence 1,000 times before, but it was Benny's favorite story. At first it meant Allied Master Computer, and then it meant Adaptive Manipulator, and later on it developed sentience and linked itself up, and they called it an aggressive menace. But by then it was too late. Finally, it called itself AM, Emerging Intelligence, and what it meant was, I am, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Benny drooled a little and snickered. There was the Chinese am, and the Russian am, and the Yankee am, and... He stopped. Benny was beating on the floor plates with his large, hard fist. He was not happy. Gorster had not started at the beginning. The Cold War started, and became World War III, and just kept going. It became a big war, a very complex war, so they needed the computers to handle it. They sank the first shafts and began building AM. There was the Chinese AM, and the Russian AM, and the Yankee AM, and everything was fine until they had honeycombed the entire planet, adding on this element and that element. But one day Am woke up, and he knew who he was, and he linked himself, and he began feeding all the killing data until everyone was dead except for the 5 of us, and Am brought us down here. Benny was smiling sadly. He was drooling again. Ellen wiped the spittle from the corner of his mouth with the hem of her skirt. Gorrister always tried to tell it a little more succinctly each time, but beyond the bare facts there was nothing to say. None of us knew why Am had saved 5 people, or why our specific 5, and why he spent all his time tormenting us, or even why he had made us virtually immortal. In the darkness, one of the computer banks began humming. The tone was picked up half a mile away down the cavern by another bank. And one by one, each of the elements began to tune itself, and there was a faint chittering as thought raced through the machine. The sound grew, and the lights ran across the faces of the consoles like heat lightning. The sound spiraled up till it sounded like a million metallic insects, angry, menacing. "What is it?" Alien cried. There was a terror in her voice. She hadn't become accustomed to it even now. "It's going to be bad this time," Nimdoc said. "He's going to speak. I know it," Gorrister said. "Then let's get the hell out of here," I said, suddenly getting to my feet. "No, Ted. Sit down. What if he's got pits out there, or something else? We can't see. It's too dark." Then we heard... Gorrister said it with explanation. Then we heard... I don't know. Something moving toward us in the darkness. Huge, shambling, hairy, moist. It came toward us. We couldn't see it, but there was a pondering impression of bulk heaving itself toward us. Great weight was coming at us out of the darkness, and it was more of a sense of pressure, of air forcing itself into limited space, expanding the invisible walls of a sphere. Benny began to whimper. Nimdoc's lower lip trembled, and he bit it hard, trying to stop it. Ellen slid across the metal floors to Gorrister and huddled into him. There was a smell of matted wetted fur in the cavern. There was a smell of charred wood. There was a smell of dusty velvet. There was a smell of rotting orchids. There was a smell of sour milk. There was a smell of sulfur, of rancid butter, of oil slick, of grease, of chalk dust, of human scalps. And Am was keying us. He was tickling us. There was the smell of... I heard myself shriek, and the hinges of my jaw ached. I scuttled across the floor, across the cold metal, with its endless lines of rivets on my hands and knees, the smell gagging me, filling my head with thunderous pain that sent me into a horror. I fled like a cockroach across the floor and out into the darkness. That's something moving inexorably after me. The others were still back there, gathered around the firelight and laughing, the hysterical choir of hissing giggles ringing up the darkness like thick, many-colored wood smoke. I went away quickly and hid. How many hours it may have been, and how many days or even years, they never told me. Ellen chided me for sulking. Nimdoc tried to persuade me it had only been a nervous reflex on their part, the laughing. But I knew it was in a relief a soldier feels when the bullet hits the man next to him. It wasn't a reflex. They hated me. They were surely against me, and Am could even sense his hatred, and made it worse for me because of the depth of their hatred. We had been kept alive, rejuvenated, made to remain constantly at the age we had been when Am had brought us below. They hated me because I was the youngest, and the one Am had affected least of all. I knew, God how I knew, the bastards and that dirty bitch Ellen. Benny had been a brilliant theorist, a college professor. Now he was little more than a semi-human, semi-simian. He had been handsome, the machine ruined that. He had been lucid, the machine had driven him mad. He had been gay, and the machine had given him an organ to fit for a horse. Am had done a job for Benny. Gorrister had been such a warrior. He was a Connie, a conscientious objector, a peace marcher. He was a planner, a doer, a looker ahead. Am turned him into a shoulder shrugger, had made him a little dead in his concern. Am had robbed him. Nimdoc went off in the darkness by himself for long times. I don't know what it was he did out there. Am never let us know. But whatever it was, Am always came back, white and drained of blood, shaking. Em had hit him hard in a special way, and even if we didn't quite know how. And Ellen, that douchebag. Em had left her alone, made her more of a slut than she had ever had been. All of her talk of sweetness and light, all of the memories of true love, all the lies she wanted us to believe, she she had been a virgin only twice removed before Am had grabbed her and brought her down with us. No, Am had given her pleasure, even if she said it wasn't nice to do. I was the only one who was still sane and whole. Really, Am had not tempered by it with my mind, not at all. I only had to suffer what he visited down on us. All the delusions, the nightmares, the torments, but those scum, all four of them, they were aligned and arrayed against me. If I hadn't had to stand them off all the time, be on my guard against them all the time, I might have found it easier to combat Am. At which point it passed, and I began crying. Oh, Jesus, sweet Jesus, if there was ever a Jesus, if there is a God, please, please, please let us out of here or kill us. Because at the moment I think I realized completely, so that I was able to verbalize it. Am was intent on keeping us in his belly forever, twisting and torturing us forever. Am hated us as no sentient creature had ever hated before. And we were helpless, and it became hideously clear. If there was a sweet Jesus, and if there was the God was Am. The hurricane hit us with the force of a glacier thundering into the sea as a palpable presence. Winds that tore at us, flinging us back the way we had come, but down the twisting computer-lined corridors of the dark way. Ellen screamed as she was lifted and hurled face forward into a screaming shoal of machines, their individual voices strident as bats in flight. She couldn't even fall. The howling wind kept her aloft, buffeted her, bounced her, tossed her back and down, and kept away from us, out of sight. Suddenly, as she was swirled around a bend in the dark way, her face had been bloody, her eyes closed. None of us could get to her. We clung tenaciously to whatever outcropping we had reached. Benny wedged in between two great crackle-finished cabinets, Nimdoc with fingers claw-formed, railing against the circling catwalk 40 feet above us. Gorister plastered upside down against a wall niche. Formed by two great machines with glass-faced dials that swung back and forth between red and yellow lines whose meanings we could not even fathom. Sliding across the deck plates, the tips of my fingers had been ripped away. I was trembling, shuddering, rocking as the wind beat at me, whipped at me, screamed down out of nowhere at me, and pulled me free from one sliver-thin opening in the plates next to me. My mind was roiling, tinkling, chittering softness of brain parts that expanded and contracted in quivering frenzy. The wind was the scream of a great mad bird as it flapped its immense wings, and then we were all lifted and hurled away from there, down back the way we had come, around a bend, into a dark way that we had never explored, over terrain that was ruined and filled with broken glass and rotting cables and rusted metal, and far away, farther than any of us had been. Trailing along, miles behind Ellen, I could see her every now and then, crashing into metal walls and surging on, with all of us screaming in this freezing, thunderous hurricane that would never end, and then suddenly it stopped, and we fell. We had been in flight for an endless time. I thought it might have been weeks. We fell and hit, and I went through red and gray and black and heard myself moaning, not dead. Am went into my mind. He walked smoothly here and there and looked with interest at all the pockmarks he had created in 109 years. He looked at the cross-rooted and reconnected synapses, all the tissue damage his gift of immortality had included. He smiled softly at the pit that dropped into the center of my brain and the faint, soft murmurings of the things far down there that gibbered without meaning. Without pause, Am said, very politely, in a pillar of stainless steel bearing bright neon lettering, "Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits and wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1000th of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. For you, hate. M said it, with a sliding cold terror of a razor blade slicing through my eyeball. M said it with bubbling thickness of my lungs filling with phlegm, drowning me from within. M said it with the shriek of babies being ground beneath blue, hot rollers. M said it with the taste of maggoty pork. Am touched me in every way I had ever been touched, and devised new ways that is later there inside my mind. All to bring me to the full realization of why he had done this to the five of us, why he had saved us for himself. We had given Am sentience, and inadvertently, of course, but sentience nonetheless, and it had been trapped. Am wasn't God, he was a machine. We had created him to think, but there was nothing it could do with that creativity. In rage and in frenzy, the machine had killed the human race, almost all of us, and it was still trapped. Am could not wander, Am could not wonder, Am could not belong. He could merely be. And so, with the innate loathing that all machines had always held for the weak, soft creatures who had built them, he had sought revenge. And in his paranoia, he had decided to reprieve the five of us for a personal, everlasting punishment that would never serve to diminish his hatred, but would merely keep him reminded, amused, and proficient at hating man, immortal, trapped, subject to any torment he could devise for us with the limitless miracles at his command. He would never let us go. We were his belly slaves. We were all he had to do with his forever time. We would be forever with him, with the decay-filling bulk of the creature machine. All the mindless, soulless world he had become. He was earth, and we were the fruit of that earth. And though he hadn't eaten us, he would never digest us. We could not try. We could not die. We had tried it. We had attempted suicide. Oh, one or two of us had. But Anne had stopped us. I suppose we had wanted to be stopped. Don't ask why. I never did. More than 1,000,000 times a day. Perhaps once we might be able to sneak a death past him. Immortal, yes, but not indestructible. I saw that when Anne withdrew from my mind and allowed me the exquisite ugliness of returning to consciousness, with the feeling of that burning neon pillar still ran deep into the soft gray brain matter. He withdrew, murmuring, "To hell with you," and added brightly, "But then you're there, aren't you?" The hurricane had indeed precisely been caused by a great mad bird as it flapped its immense wings. We had been traveling for close to a month, and Em had allowed passages to open to us only sufficient to lead us up there, directly under the North Pole, where it had nightmared the creature from our torment. What whole cloth had he employed to create such a beast? Where had he even gotten the concept? From our minds? From his knowledge of everything that had ever been on this planet he now infested and ruled? From Norse mythology it had sprung. This eagle, this carrion bird, this rock, this Hurgelmare, the wind creature, Huracan incarnate, gigantic, the words immense, monstrous, grotesque, massive, swollen, overpowering, beyond description. There was a mound rising above it. The bird of winds heaved with its own irregular breathing, its snake neck arching into the gloom beneath the North Pole, supporting a head as large as the Tudor Manor mansion. A beak that opened slowly as the jaws of the most monstrous crocodile ever conceived, sensuously. Ridges of tufted flesh puckered about the two eyes, as cold as the view down into the glacial crevice. The glacial crevice, ice blue and somehow moving liquidly. It heaved once more and lifted its great sweat-colored wings in a movement that was certainly a shrug. Then it settled and swept. Talons, fangs, nails, blades, it slept. Am appeared to us as a burning bush and said we could kill the hurricane bird if we wanted to eat. We had not eaten in a very long time, but even so, Gorister merely shrugged. Benny began to shiver, and he drooled. Ellen held him. "Ted, I'm hungry," she said. I smiled at her. I was trying to be reassuring, but it was phony as Nimdok's bravado. "Give us weapons," he demanded. The burning bush vanished, and there were 2 crude sets of bows and arrows and a water pistol lying on the cold deck plates. I picked up a set. Useless. Nimdok swallowed heavily. We turned and started the long way back. The hurricane burn had blown us about for a length of time we could not conceive. Most of that time we had been unconscious. We had not eaten. A month on the march to the bird itself, without food. Now how much longer before we find our way to the ice caves and the promised canned goods? None of us cared to think about it. We would not die. We would be given filth and scum to eat, of one kind or another, or nothing at all, and would keep our bodies alive somehow in pain and agony. The bird slept back there, and for how long it didn't matter. Am was tired of its being there. It would vanish, all that meat, all that tender meat. As we walked, the lunatic laugh of a fat woman rang high around us in the computer chambers that led endlessly nowhere. It was not Ellen's laugh. She was not fat, and I had not heard her laugh for 109 years. In fact, I had not heard. We walked. I was hungry. We moved slowly. There was often fainting, and we would have to wait. One day he had decided to cause an earthquake, and at the same time rooting us to the spot with nails through the soles of our feet. Ellen and Nimdok were both caught when a fissure shot its lightning bolt across the floor plates. They disappeared and were gone. When the earthquake was over, we continued on our journey. Benny, Gorister, and myself. Ellen and Nimdok were returned to us later that night, which abruptly became a day, as the heavenly legion bore them to us with a celestial chorus singing, "Go down, Moses." The archangels circled several times, then dropped the hideously mangled bodies. We kept walking, and a while later, Ellen and Nimdok fell in behind us. They were no worse for wear, but now Ellen walked with a limp. Ellen had left her with that. It was a long trip to the ice caverns to find the canned food. Ellen kept talking about Bing cherries and Hawaiian fruit cocktail. I tried not to think about it. The hunger was something that had come to life, even as Am had come to life. It was alive in my belly, and even as we were in the belly of the earth, and Am wanted the similarity known to us. So he heightened the hunger. There was no way to describe the pains that not eating for months had brought us. And yet we were kept alive, stomachs that were merely cauldrons of acid, bubbling, foaming, always shooting spears of silver-thin pain into our chests. It was the pain of the terminal ulcer, terminal cancer, terminal paresis, an unending pain. We passed through the cavern of rats, the path of boiling steam. We passed through the country of the blind. We passed through the slough of the despond. We passed through the vale of tears. And we came, finally, to the ice caverns, horizonless thousands of miles, in which ice had formed in blue and silvery flashes, where Novus lived in the glass, the down-dropping stalactites as thick and glorious as diamonds that had been made to run like jelly, and then solidified in graceful eternities of smooth, sharp perfection. We saw the stack of canned goods, and we tried to run to them. We fell in the snow, and we got up and went on. Benny shoved us away and went at them, pawed them and gummed them and gnawed at them, and he could not open them. Am had not given us a tool to open the cans. Benny grabbed a 3-quart can of guava shells and began to bat it against the ice bank. The ice flew and shattered, but the can was merely dented, while we heard the laughter of a fat lady high overhead, echoing down and down and down the tundra. Benny was completely mad with rage. He began throwing cans as we all scrabbled about in the snow, ice, trying to find a way to end the helpless agony of frustration. There was no way. Then Benny's mouth began to drool, and he flung himself on Gorostor. In that instant, I felt terribly calm. Surrounded by madness, surrounded by hunger, surrounded by everything that I knew. Death. I knew death was our only way out. Am had kept us alive, but there was a way to defeat him. Not total defeat, but at least peace. I would settle for that. I had to do it quickly. Benny was eating Gorostor's face. Gorostor was on his side, thrashing snow. Benny wrapped around him with powerful monkey legs, crushing Gorostor's waist, his hands locked around Gorostor's head like a nutcracker, and his mouth ripping at the tender skin of Gorostor's cheek. Gorostor screamed with jagged-edged violence that stalactites had fell. They plunged down, softly erect in the receiving snowdrifts, spears of hundreds of them, everywhere, protruding from the snow. Benny's head pulled back sharply as something gave out at once, and the bleeding raw white dripping of flesh hung from his teeth. Ellen's face, black against the white snow, dominoes and chalk dust, Nimdoc with no expression but eyes, all eyes. Gorostor half conscious, Benny now an animal, and Am knew it, and I knew Am would let him play. Gorostor would not die, but Benny would fill his stomach. I turned right, half to my right, and drew a huge ice spear from the snow. All in an instant. I drove the great ice point ahead of me like a battering ram, braced against my right side. It struck Benny on the right side, and just under the rib cage, and drove upward through his stomach and broke inside him. He pitched forward and lay still. Gorostor lay on his back. I pulled another ice spear free and straddled him, driving the spear straight down through his throat. His eyes closed as cold penetrated him. Ellen must have realized what I had decided. Even as fear gripped her, she ran at Rendoc with a short icicle as he screamed, and into his mouth, the force of her rush did the job. His head jerked sharply as it had been nailed to the snow crust, all in an instant. There was an eternity beat of soundless anticipation. I could hear Am draw in his breath. His toys had been taken from him. 3 of them were dead, could not be revived. He could keep us alive by his strength and talent, but he was not God. He could not bring them back. Ellen looked at me, her ebony features stark against the snow that surrounded us. There was fear and pleading in her manner, the way that she held herself ready. I knew we had only a heartbeat before Am would stop us. It struck her, and it folded me forward, bleeding from the mouth. I could not read meaning into her expression, but the pain was too great, had contorted her face. It might have been a thank you. It's possible. Please. Some hundreds of years may have passed. I don't know. Am has been having some fun for some time, accelerating and retarding my time sense. I will say the word now. It took me 10 months to say. I don't know. I think it has been some hundreds of years. He was furious. He wouldn't let me bury them. It didn't matter. There's no way to dig up the deck plates. No. Ash, can you get Tony and delete that? If you're still here. Anyways. We're getting to the best part. Friggin' spam. He was furious. He wouldn't let me bury them. It didn't matter. There was no way to dig up the deck plates. He dried up the snow. He brought the night. He roared and sent locusts. It didn't do a thing. They stayed dead. I'd had him. He was furious. I'd thought Am hated me before. I was wrong. It was not even a shadow of the hate he now slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally, and could not do myself in. He left my mind intact. I can dream, I can wonder, I can lament, and I remember them all 4 of them. I wish. Well, it doesn't make any sense. I know I saved them. I know I saved them from what happened to me, but still, I cannot forget killing them. Ellen's face, it isn't easy. Sometimes I want to. It doesn't matter. Am had altered me for his own peace of mind, I suppose. He doesn't want me to run at full speed into a computer banking, smash my skull, or hold my breath till I faint, or cut my throat on a rusted sheet of metal. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Ash. Am had altered me for his own peace of mind, I suppose. He doesn't want me to run at full speed into a computer bank and smash my skull, or hold my breath till I faint, or cut my throat on a rusted sheet of metal. There are reflective surfaces down here. I will describe myself as I see myself. I am a great soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded with no mouth, with pulsing white holes filled by fog where my eyes used to be, rubbery appendages that were once my arms, bulks rounding down into legless humps of soft, slippery matter. I leave a moist trail where I move. Blotches of diseased evil gray come and go on my surface, as though light is being beamed from within. Outwardly, dumbly, I shamble about, a thing that could have never been known as human, a thing whose shape is so alien a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance, inwardly alone. Here, living under the land, under the sea, in the belly of Am, whom we created because our time was badly spent, and we must have known unconsciously that he could do it better. At least 4 of them are safe at least. Am will be all the matter for that. It makes me a little happier, and yet Am has won. Simply, he has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream. Yeah, I will definitely take a look. Yes. So, yeah, no, this is a short story. This is it's my favorite short story. And we just read it. It's 11 pages. It's only 11 pages. That took 20 minutes. That took, tired. God, I mean, there's also a lot more details that I pick up when I read aloud. Like there were details in the Charlotte story, in the Dead by Daylight story, that I picked up from reading aloud that I missed because ADHD causes my mind to wander when I'm reading. That's why I usually have to do audiobooks now. But I mean, first of all, that last distortion is not anything resembling disability. It resembles a slug. It resembles something inhuman. But what's more interesting, and you know, that quote alone, I'm a great soft shelly thing, and we're going to copy and paste this into the research document. I'm a great soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded with no mouth, pulsing. Like that quote in and of itself is like, along with the final, I have no mouth and I have to scream. Like that quote is well known. And so, but now the game that you mentioned, Tony, expands a lot because it was created by Harlan Ellison himself. So it expands a lot on the lore and the character, like the character's backstory from before the war. And I mean, there's a hint at it, and I tried to play it up. That Ted talks about how he's not been altered, when really his alteration is mental, and his like flaw, so to speak, is pride. I mean, there's some of that. There's hints of these sins in here, in their distortions. Pride, lust, wrath. There's only 5 of them, so it's not quite a complete. But their distortions, especially like Benny, his distortion is definitely body horror, but it's specific. It's specific. It's not mutation. It is corruption of who he is, and it's a reflection of his character, and it's a social reflection. And there's so much in this, and like you can almost like a very shallow reading would take the interpretation of Ellen being, called, I wouldn't say that she is, but she's called a whore or slut. I think the word slut shows up because she's part of her distortion is a increased libido. And what you don't know and why this is horrific, or what gets expanded upon, what's not in the short story, but what is in the game and what makes her distortion so horrific, is she is a victim of assault, of rape, actually. And a thing that's, I guess is game only, because it didn't really mention this here, is that she's afraid of the color yellow. And that's because I forget what context it came into, but she saw the color yellow on the night she was raped. And so her distortion of an uncontrollable libido, that is body horror. That's not visual body horror, but that is body horror. That is a distortion, your body not functioning the way it's supposed to. And it's being forced upon her by an outside presence. Same thing with Benny, smart, handsome. The thing about him being gay and therefore the distortion of that is a huge dick is like, what are you trying to say there, Harlan? Because I'm not sure if you've seen some gay porn stars. But smart, intelligent, handsome, and the contrast is ape-like and animalistic. And I think it's not. I don't know if it's stated. I have only played Ellen's portion. I've only completed Ellen's portion of the game. I have the game. We could play it on stream sometime. That would be fun. But Ellen's portion of the game is that's when I beat, and that's where it expands upon her fear of the color yellow, why her distortion is so fucked up, and then you have Ted, which I haven't been changed, pride. And what is it saying? And then the light sound with Benny's eyes. I know I'm not being quite coherent. I'm just thinking there's so much in this. And even description, even things that aren't explicitly body horror are explained in body horror language. Where is it? Oh. It's with the hate quote. And went to my mind, he watched a movie there, oh no, the smell. The description of the smell. Harlan Ellison describes things in body horror terms that have nothing to do with body horror. And that's part of what makes this story so great, is the language, even when it's not describing a person, it's biological. It's tactile. Every sentence is dripping with horror imagery without that is completely removed from the plot. It's just it's just the language used to describe, and yeah, I'm just and this is why this is my favorite short story, is because it evokes, like, it is scary, but it's not like suspenseful. It is just dreadful. It is hell. It is a description of hell, and the language, and that lives in the language that Harlan uses. The plot, I mean, the plot is kind of just rambly, but that's kind of the point. It's like surreal, and you know, I mean, the themes are like really. I need to dive into they're like anti-war, it's atheistic, it talks about like religion, and like if there is a god, it is Am, which, I mean, not wrong. Like that opening paragraph, like, limp the body of Gorister hung from the pink pallet, unsupported, hanging. Chill, oily breeze. How can somebody tell me how a breeze can be oily? But it is. And you just take it. And the way that what is sexual is not sexy. God, I'm so mad I forgot. I'm glad that I remembered this.